After his life collapsed, Delta Force found refuge on his grandmother's island. The truth was waiting. They told Nessa Crane she'd killed a man. The accusation came wrapped in a court order, delivered by a deputy who wouldn't meet her eyes, and it stripped her of her nursing license, her apartment, and every shred of the life she'd built on the mainland. So she did the only thing left. She went home. Back to Prosper Island, back to her grandmother's crumbling clinic, back to the salt-eaten dock where she'd once dreamed of escaping. She didn't expect the man sleeping on the porch of the old Harlan house. 6'3", jaw clenched even in unconsciousness, dog tags catching the last of the sun. She didn't expect the smell of infection rising from his left side like a warning, and she certainly didn't expect to fall in love with someone whose grandmother had once owned half the island, whose blood carried a secret that could prove her innocence, and whose body was slowly shutting down from a wound he refused to let anyone treat. This is the story of what happens when two people with nothing left find each other in the one place they both tried to leave behind. And it will wreck you. The ferry dropped Nessa at the Prosper Island dock at 4:17 in the afternoon, and she knew the exact time because she'd been counting minutes since Charleston, since the courtroom, since the moment Dr. Ellis Vane had looked at her across the plaintiff's table and said, with practiced grief, that patient 9 would be alive today if Nurse Crane had followed protocol. She hadn't cried then. She didn't cry now. She adjusted the strap of her duffel on her shoulder, tasted salt on her lower lip, not tears, just the island's air, thick with brine and pluff mud and the faintly sweet rot of cordgrass, and walked the quarter-mile to Granny Opal's clinic. The clinic was dark, the generator was dead, but someone had left a jar of beach plum jam on the step with a note that read, "Welcome home," baby in her cousin Delphine's handwriting, and that nearly broke her where the courtroom hadn't. She dropped her bag inside, didn't bother with the lights, and walked the property line toward the Harlan house because something was off. A truck in the drive, South Carolina plates mud-caked, the porch light buzzing with moths. And him. He was sitting now, not sleeping, and the first thing she noticed was his hands. They gripped the arms of the Adirondack chair with a controlled stillness that had nothing to do with calm. His left side was angled away from her, his breathing was shallow, and the salt air carried something underneath itself when it passed him, something copper-sweet and wrong. Infection, deep tissue, days old at least. She stopped 10 feet from the porch steps. Her body wanted to close the distance. Her training demanded it. But she was not a nurse anymore. A judge had made sure of that. He looked at her. His eyes were the color of the marsh at dusk. Green-gray, flat with exhaustion. A scar bisected his left eyebrow. He was beautiful in the way that broken infrastructure is beautiful. You admire it, but you don't trust it to hold weight. Neither of them spoke. She turned and walked back to her grandmother's clinic, and she felt his gaze on her spine the entire way, and the copper-sweet smell stayed in her nostrils through dinner, through the cold water she splashed on her face, through the shallow, restless dark of her first night home. His name was Callum Harlan. She knew that by morning because Delphine called at 6 a.m. and told her everything the island's gossip chain had assembled. Delta Force, decorated, honorable discharge following an incident in Syria that nobody would specify. His grandmother, Ida Harlan, had died 8 months ago and left him the house, the land, and a locked filing cabinet that the island lawyer, Maurice Shanley, said contained documents relevant to Prosper Island's original land trust. He'd arrived 4 days ago. He hadn't spoken to anyone. He'd driven to the mainland once for supplies and come back with canned goods, whiskey, and a limp he was clearly trying to hide. "He's hurt," Nessa said. "He's also fine as hell," Delphine said. "But I'm not calling about that. Maurice Shanley's been asking about you. About Granny Opal's clinic records. Something about the land trust documents in Ida Harlan's cabinet, matching up with patient files from the 70s. Delphine. I just got home. I know. I'm just telling you. Shanley works for Vane's family trust on the mainland side. Be careful." The name Vane hit her ribs. She hung up. She spent the day cleaning the clinic, mopping, sorting expired supplies, trying to remember what her hands were for, if not the work they'd been trained to do. By afternoon, she was standing at the property line again, not because she wanted to be, but because the wind shifted and she caught it, that copper-sweet thread in the salt air, and her body overrode her mind. He was on the porch again. Same chair, a glass of water on the rail, untouched. His left arm was pressed against his side in a way she recognized. Guarding. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. "You need a doctor." He looked at her. 3 full seconds. "No. The nearest hospital is a 40-minute ferry ride and a 30-minute drive. In your condition, that's a generous timeline for sepsis." I said, "No." "I heard you." She didn't move. "I'm not a doctor. I was a nurse." Was. Past tense. So this isn't professional advice. This is one human being telling another that the smell coming off your left side means you have about 72 hours before your body starts a war it can't win. Something shifted in his jaw. Not softening. Recalculation. "You're Opal Crane's granddaughter." "Yes, she stitched me up once. I was 9. Fell out of the live oak behind the chapel." He paused. She had steady hands. "So do I." "Past tense," he said, throwing her own words back. "Steady hands don't expire. Licenses do." She turned. "The offer's open. The clinic has supplies, even if half of them are from 2014. Your call." She walked away. She did not look back. She did not need to. She heard his breathing change, a short, involuntary grunt of pain as he shifted, and the copper sweetness followed her home. He came to the clinic at 11 that night. She heard the truck first, engine cutting, door closing with the careful discipline of a man trained to minimize sound. Then the knock. 2 raps, measured. She opened the door. He was standing in the yellow porch light with his shirt half unbuttoned and his face the color of old candle wax, and she knew then that 72 hours had been generous. "Don't tell anyone," he said. "I don't have anyone to tell. That makes 2 of us." She stepped aside. He walked in, and the exam room, her grandmother's exam room, with its faded anatomy poster and the cracked leather table, felt smaller with him in it. He sat on the table without being asked. His fingers found the remaining buttons. "May the 1st," she said, and held up both hands, palms out. He looked at her hands, then her face. He nodded once. She unbuttoned the rest of his shirt. The wound was on his left flank, a ragged laceration, poorly sutured and furiously infected. Someone with field training had closed it, but the closure was too tight, and the tissue beneath had begun to reject itself. "This isn't from Syria," she said. "No." "How old?" 12 days. "Who sutured it?" "I did." She exhaled. "Callum. This needs to be debrided and reclosed. And I have lidocaine that expired in 2019, which means it will work at about 60%. 60% is enough." She cleaned her hands. She laid out the instruments. She told him everything she was going to do before she did it, because that was the only power she could give him in a situation where he was shirtless on a table, and she was the one holding the scalpel. He didn't flinch, not once. When she irrigated the wound bed and the fluid ran cloudy, he gripped the edge of the table and breathed through his nose and said, "Your grandmother hummed when she worked. Hymns. Precious Lord, take my hand," Nessa said. "That's the one. I don't hum." She placed the first new suture. "I talk, then talk." So she did. She told him about the expired supplies and the dead generator and the beach plum jam, and nothing about the courtroom, nothing about Dr. Ellis Vane, nothing about Patient 9. She talked about the island, the fiddler crabs that turned the mudflats blue at low tide, the way the chapel bell sounded different before a storm, the exact temperature at which Pluff mud stopped smelling like decay and started smelling like home. She talked until the last suture was placed and the bandage was taped and he was breathing easier, and the copper sweetness was still there but fainter, retreating. "Nessa," he said. It was the first time he'd used her name, and the sound of it in his voice, low, rough, deliberate, landed in her chest with a weight that had nothing to do with medicine. Nessa Crane. I owe you. You don't. I pay my debts. Then get some sleep and don't rip my sutures. He buttoned his shirt. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and said without turning, "The man who hurt you, the one who took your license. What's his name?" Her blood cooled. "How do you know about that?" "Morris Shanley talks. He thinks I'm not listening." He turned now, and his green-grey eyes were no longer flat. They were focused with a precision she associated with scopes and trigger discipline. "What's his name?" "Ellis Vane." Callum nodded. "Once. He left." She locked the door and stood in the middle of the exam room and pressed her hands flat against the table where he'd sat and felt the residual warmth of his body in the cracked leather, and the salt air coming through the window carried no copper at all now, just brine and night jasmine, and something new underneath that she refused to name. 2 days later, Morris Shanley came to the clinic. He was a small man with expensive shoes and a smile that showed too many teeth, and he represented, he said, the Varney Family Trust, which held a 30% interest in Prosper Island's original land trust. "Miss Crane, I'm here in a friendly capacity." He set a folder on the counter. "There are questions about your grandmother's clinic records, specifically patient files from 1974 to 1979. Ida Harlan's estate documents reference a secondary beneficiary on the land trust, and we believe your grandmother may have maintained records that clarify the chain of title. Those records are confidential. Your grandmother is deceased. The patients in question are deceased. Confidentiality has a shelf life, Miss Crane. Get out of my clinic." He didn't move. "I should mention that Dr. Vane has expressed willingness to revisit the terms of your license revocation. If the records were made available for review, I think you'd find him quite reasonable." The air in the room changed. Not temperature, pressure. She felt it in her eardrums, in the space between her ribs, and she understood then that her accusation and the land trust and Callum Harlan's return were not separate things. They were the same thing. They had always been the same thing. "I said, get out." "I'd think carefully, Miss Crane. You have very few friends left. She has one." Callum's voice came from the doorway. He filled it, shoulders, height, the particular stillness of a man who has calculated exactly how much force he is choosing not to use. He was looking at Shanley with an expression Nessa could only describe as professional. Shanley's smile collapsed. "Mr. Harlan, I didn't realize—" "Miss Crane asked you to leave. I'm asking once more. There won't be a third time." Shanley gathered his folder. His hands were shaking. He edged past Callum in the doorway, giving him a wide berth that had the geometry of fear, and his expensive shoes crunched on the gravel drive, and the car started, and he was gone. Callum stayed in the doorway. "You okay?" "I'm angry." "Good. Angry keeps you sharp." He paused. "My grandmother's filing cabinet. I haven't opened it. I think you should be there when I do." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because whatever Shanley wants in your grandmother's records, my grandmother made sure it was locked in her house. That means she was protecting someone. And I think it was you." That night, she changed his bandage. The wound was responding, tissue pink and healthy, drainage clear. But when she pressed gently along his flank, she felt something she hadn't before, a tremor beneath the skin. Involuntary, deep. "How long have you had the shaking?" she said. "It comes and goes." "Callum, 8 months. Started after my last deployment. Docs said it was neurological. Stress-related tremor. Gave me pills. Pills didn't work." She kept her hands on his side. The tremor was faint but persistent, running through his muscles with a rhythm that didn't match his heartbeat. The copper-sweet smell was gone from the wound, but she caught it now on his breath, faint, metallic, and her training screamed a word she didn't say out loud. Toxicity, not stress. Poisoning. She pulled the bandage tight and didn't tell him. Not yet. Not until she was sure. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking about..." about how someone who sutures his own wounds in a mirror doesn't go to a civilian clinic for shaking hands. His jaw tightened. I didn't come to the island for treatment. Why did you come? Because my grandmother asked me to, before she died. She said there was something in the house I needed to find, and that I should find it before the Vanes did. And have you? The filing cabinet's locked. I don't have the key. She looked at him. He looked back. The exam room held them in its small yellow light, and the salt air moved between them carrying night jasmine and something copper-faint and wrong. My grandmother, Nessa said slowly, kept a key ring in the medicine cabinet. 30 keys. She never told me what they all opened. Would you look? Tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep. He caught her wrist, gently. His thumb rested against her pulse point, and she felt his tremor transfer into her skin, a vibration so subtle it was almost warmth. Is this all right? He said. Yes. I want you to know that I'm asking, not assuming. I know. He released her. He left. She stood in the exam room holding her own wrist where his thumb had been and breathing the jasmine salt air and understanding, with the clarity of diagnosis, that she was in serious trouble. She found the key on the second day, small, brass, stamped with the initials IH, Ida Harlan. She brought it to Callum's porch at dusk and he led her inside. The Harlan house was spare, clean, full of his grandmother's furniture and his grandmother's silence. The filing cabinet sat in the back bedroom. She handed him the key. He opened it. Inside, land trust documents dating to 1962. Patient files, copies not originals, from Opal Crane's clinic, and a handwritten letter from Ida Harlan to her grandson, dated 6 weeks before her death. Callum read it. His face didn't change, but his hands, both of them, were shaking now. She knew, he said. My grandmother knew that Ellis Vane's father falsified the land trust in 1979. He forged signatures. He used your grandmother's patient records to prove that the original black landowners on Prosper Island were mentally incompetent, which voided their claims. Your grandmother's files were the evidence. She refused to hand them over, so the Vanes had her clinic defunded. And then her granddaughter became a nurse, Nessa said, and got too close to the Vane family practice, and saw patient 9's chart. What was on it? Ellis Vane prescribed a compound to a 60-year-old man, Arthur Gaines, patient 9, that interacted with his existing medication. I flagged it. Vane overrode me. Arthur died, and Vane blamed the override on my nursing notes. He killed his own patient to cover the prescription error. Yes. And then he killed my career to make sure no one believed me. Callum set the letter down. His hands were trembling visibly now, and the copper taste was on the air between them, and she could see the fine sheen of sweat at his temples. The compound, she said. The one Vane prescribed to Arthur Gaines. What was it? He told her the name of his own medication, the pills the military doctors had given him for the tremors, prescribed through a VA referral that she now understood had been routed through a Vane-affiliated pharmacy. And the compound was the same, the exact same. Her knees went soft. She grabbed the edge of the filing cabinet. Callum. That compound doesn't treat tremors, it causes them. In sustained doses, it causes organ damage. Someone has been poisoning you. He stared at her. The tremor in his hands became a tremor in his forearms, his shoulders, a full-body vibration that was no longer subtle. How long? He said. 8 months of that dosage? You need blood work. You need chelation. You need... How long do I have? She put her hands on his face, both hands, palms flat against his jaw, and his stubble was rough under her fingers and his skin was too warm and the copper was on his breath, and she said, Long enough. If you stop taking the pills tonight, I can run the chelation protocol. My grandmother's clinic has the supplies. It's old school, but it works. I stopped the pills 3 days ago. When you mentioned toxicity without saying the word. You heard that? I heard everything you didn't say. You're not subtle, Nessa. You're just careful. His hands came up and covered hers where they held his face. and the tremor passed between them in the dark room with Ida Harlan's letter on the desk, and the truth of 2 families' destruction laid bare in a filing cabinet. "I want to kiss you," he said. "Tell me if that's what you want." "It's what I want." He kissed her. His mouth was dry and hot and tasted of copper, and he kissed her the way he did everything, with controlled precision that broke apart halfway through, giving way to something ragged and real. Her back hit the filing cabinet. His hands found her waist, then her hips, then the bare skin above her waistband where her shirt had ridden up, and the contact of his calloused fingers against her stomach made her gasp into his mouth. "Tell me to stop," he said against her lips. "No. Tell me what you want. More." He lifted her, not dramatically, efficiently, like a man who understood leverage and weight distribution, and the precise amount of strength required to seat a woman on the edge of a desk without disrupting a single document. She wrapped her legs around him and felt the heat of his body through his clothes and the tremor in his muscles and the hard evidence of exactly how much he wanted this pressed against her inner thigh. She pulled at his shirt. He helped her, unbuttoning with shaking fingers that fumbled the 3rd button, and she covered his hands with hers and finished it for him, and when his shirt was open, she placed her palm flat over his heart and felt it hammering. Too fast, stressed, the copper sweetness rising from his skin with his sweat. "Nessa, I need to know that you're choosing this. I have been choosing this since you sat on my exam table and told me about my grandmother's hymns." He exhaled hard and kissed her throat, and his mouth was open against her pulse, and she felt his teeth graze her skin without pressure. A question, not a claim. She answered by pulling him closer with her legs and arching into the contact and hearing the sound he made, low in his chest, half groan and half surrender. She unbuckled his belt. He sucked in a breath. Her fingers found him through the fabric, and he dropped his forehead against her shoulder and said her name, just her name, nothing else, broken across 2 syllables, and she knew then that he hadn't been touched with kindness in a very long time. "Look at me," she said. He lifted his head. Green-gray eyes, blown dark, tremor in his jaw. "I want this," she said. "I want you. And I need you to believe that I'm not fragile and neither are you." He kissed her again, harder this time, deeper, and his hands went to the hem of her shirt and pulled it over her head in one motion, and his mouth found the curve of her shoulder, the hollow of her throat, the space between her breasts where her heartbeat lived. She unhooked her own bra because his hands were shaking too badly, and she refused to let him feel ashamed of that, and when her skin was bare he stopped, completely stopped, held still with his mouth an inch from her collarbone, and breathed. "You are so goddamn beautiful," he said, "and I am trying very hard to go slow. I don't want slow." His hands closed over her breasts, and she arched into the contact, and made a sound that she would later deny and not regret. He worked her jeans open. She lifted her hips. He pulled them down with her underwear, and the desk was cold beneath her bare skin, and he was warm against her front, and the contrast, cold wood, hot man, salt air through the window, broke something open in her chest. She pushed his jeans down. He helped. They were skin to skin now from hip to chest, and his tremor was everywhere, transmitted through every point of contact, and she took it into her body and held it there because that was what she knew how to do. Absorb the damage and convert it to something survivable. "Condom," she whispered. "Wallet, back pocket." He reached without letting go of her. "Foil packet." She took it from his shaking fingers and opened it and rolled it on herself because this was not the moment for his hands to fail him, and when she touched him to do it, he made a sound against her neck that she would hear for the rest of her life. He entered her slowly, inch by inch, watching her face the entire time. She watched his. The tremor was in his hips now, fine and constant, and it created a vibration inside her that built and built without crest, a low sustained note of pleasure that matched the rhythm of his damaged nervous system. "Okay?" he said. "God, yes." He moved. She moved with him. The desk creaked. The filing cabinet rattled. His mouth found hers and they breathed the same copper salt air, and her nails dug into his back, and he braced one hand on the desk behind her, and the other cradled the base of her skull, and his fingers were in her hair, and the tremor translated into tempo, and he was shaking, but he was steady, impossibly steady where it mattered, and she came with her face pressed against his neck and his name in her mouth and her body clenching around his damaged one, and he followed her 30 seconds later with a sound that was almost silence, a caught breath, a held note, a man's whole body locking and releasing in a single devastating wave. He stayed inside her, forehead against hers, breathing. "I should go," he said. "You should." He kissed her temple, pulled out carefully, cleaned up with a precision that was almost military, dressed, buttoned his shirt with hands that were steadier now. "Tomorrow," he said. It wasn't a question. Tomorrow. He left. The door closed. The truck started. She sat on the desk with her clothes in a pile beside her, and the Harlan family letter under her left hip, and the salt air cooling her skin, and the copper taste fading from the room with him. She went to the clinic the next morning and organized the chelation supplies and burned with embarrassment at how quickly she looked up when she heard a truck engine. It wasn't his. It was Delphine, bringing coffee and that look, the one that meant the island had already transmitted the relevant data through its network of screen porches and clotheslines. "You have a hickey," Delphine said. Nessa slapped her hand to her neck. "I do not. You do. Left side. And you're wearing the same shirt as yesterday." "I am not. I changed." She looked down. She had not changed. Delphine sat on the counter and sipped her coffee with theatrical calm. So, the Delta Force hermit. "Delphine, baby, I am not judging, I am advising. That man has been running on adrenaline and isolation for God knows how long. He's going to bolt. You know what you do with a man who bolts? I don't want to know. You exhaust him. You wear him out so thoroughly that he doesn't have the energy to overthink. You make yourself the place he rests, not with conversation, not with nursing, with your body. You hear me? Every time he starts building a wall, you climb it. This is wildly inappropriate career counseling. This is your cousin telling you to go ride that man into the mattress before his noble suffering instinct kicks in." Nessa put her face in her hands. Through her fingers, she said, "He's being poisoned, Delphine. The veins are poisoning him through his medication." Delphine set down her coffee. The humor left her face. "Then you better work fast, on all fronts." She went to his house that evening. She brought chelation supplies. He opened the door and looked at the medical bag and looked at her and said, "You came back. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you'd reconsider." She pushed past him into the house and set up the 4-kit on the kitchen table and said, "Sit down, drink this electrolyte solution, and take your shirt off." "In that order?" "In any order. But the shirt comes off either way." He sat, he drank, he took his shirt off. She started the 4 infusion and monitored his vitals and waited until the chelation agent began to work, which took 22 minutes, during which she watched the tremor in his hands gradually settle from a shake to a quiver. "It's working," she said. "I feel it." "Good. You'll need 7 sessions, 1 per night. 1 per night." He looked at her. "Will you stay?" "For the infusion." "After the infusion." She removed the 4th, she taped the site. She put her supplies away with hands that were perfectly steady. Then she climbed into his lap in the kitchen chair and kissed him with 4 hours of Delphine's advice roaring in her head, and he caught her hips and pulled her against him, and she felt him harden beneath her, and his hands were barely shaking now. And when she pulled back, he was looking at her with an expression of such bewildered gratitude that she kissed him again to erase it. She took him to bed. His grandmother's guest room, clean sheets, the window open to the marsh. She undressed him slowly this time. Every piece, every scar catalogued by her fingers, the shrapnel pockmarks on his right shoulder, the surgical scar on his left knee, the wound on his flank healing clean under her sutures. She pushed him back on the mattress and straddled him and took control with a deliberateness that left no room for his guilt or his nobility or his instinct to protect her from himself. He let her. He gripped the headboard with both hands and let her set the pace and said, "Tell me if—" And she cut him off with her mouth and her hips, and the sound he made was not language, and she rode him until his back arched and his hands released the headboard and found her waist, and he pulled her down against his chest and finished inside her with his face in her hair and his arms locked around her back. She didn't move off him. She stayed, skin to skin. His heartbeat slowed under her ear, his breathing deepened, his arms went slack but didn't release her. He slept. She lay on his chest and listened to his heart. Steady now, no arrhythmia, the copper sweetness fading from his sweat, and she stayed awake counting the intervals between his breaths because that was the closest thing to prayer she knew. In the morning he was watching her. She opened her eyes and he was on his side, one hand near her face but not touching, hovering an inch from her cheek. "Can I?" he said. "You can." He touched her cheek, drew his thumb along her jaw. "I woke up wanting to hold you and didn't know if that was allowed." "It's allowed. I woke up wanting a lot of things. But what you want comes first." She turned her face into his palm. "I want coffee. And then I want to open every file in your grandmother's cabinet. And then I want you again. In that order. In exactly that order." On the fourth night, the tremor came back. Bad. She was running his infusion when his whole body seized. Not a convulsion, but a rolling tremor that started in his hands and swept through his torso and left him gripping the chair arms with white knuckles. The copper smell flooded back, sharp and metallic, coating the inside of her mouth. "Callum, I'm fine. You are not fine. Your body is dumping toxins faster than the chelation can clear them, and your liver is struggling. I can hear it in your breathing. You can hear my liver? I can hear the fluid. Lie down." She spent the night monitoring him. The tremor ebbed and surged. His temperature spiked at 2 a.m. and broke at 4. She changed his sheets. She held cold cloths to his neck. She lay beside him and put her hand over his heart and counted the beats, and the copper smell was so strong it burned her sinuses, and she thought, for the first time with clinical certainty, that he might die. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, just quietly, in a dead woman's guest room, on an island that had already taken so much. At dawn, he was coherent, weak but clear. "The tremor started 8 months ago," he said. "After my grandmother died, after Shanley became the estate executor. He sent me to a affiliated doctor in Charleston. That doctor prescribed the compound. That doctor works for Ellis Vane. Yes, Callum. Why would the Varnes want you sick? Because my grandmother's estate includes the land trust documents. If I die without an heir, the estate reverts to a conservatorship. Shanley administers. The documents disappear. The Vanes own the island." She sat up. "Your grandmother was the secondary beneficiary. She inherited the land rights from the original black families. She was protecting them. She was protecting them by keeping the records. And she asked me to come home and find them before the Vanes found a way to make them disappear." "They're not going to disappear," Nessa said. "I have the matching patient files. Your grandmother had the land trust documents. Together, they prove the forgery. Ellis Vane's father falsified signatures using competency assessments that were never actually conducted. My grandmother refused to fabricate the assessments. That's why they destroyed her clinic. And that's why they destroyed your career. You were getting close. I didn't even know I was getting close. I just saw a bad prescription and reported it." He reached for her hand. His grip was weak but deliberate. "Nessa, I need you to know something. Whatever happens to me, the files, the documents, the testimony, promise me you'll use them. Nothing is happening to you. My body is... Your body is detoxing. You have 5 more sessions. I will sit beside you for every one, and I will run the protocol, and you will recover, because I am a very good nurse who happens to not have a license, and I did not survive Ellis Vane's courtroom to lose you in a guest bedroom. So shut up. Drink your electrolytes, and trust me." He drank his electrolytes. He trusted her. On the 7th night, after the final infusion, he was sitting on the porch of the Harlan house, and she was beside him. His hands were still, completely still. The salt air moved between them, carrying jasmine and brine, and nothing copper, nothing metallic, nothing wrong. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Tell me. When I came to this island, I was planning to die here. Not actively, I was going to stop fighting it. Let whatever was happening to my body finish. I had no one. My unit was gone. My grandmother was gone. The house was just a place to be quiet. And now I have you. And that changes the math." He turned to her. The porch light caught his eyes, green-gray but warmer now, lit from behind by something that wasn't just survival. "Nessa, I'm trying to say that He stopped, not because he chose to. His body seized. The tremor returned with a violence she hadn't seen, his whole frame locking, his jaw clenching, his eyes rolling back. He fell sideways off the chair and she caught him, barely, and his weight bore them both to the porch floor, and the copper smell exploded back, thick and choking, and she screamed his name. "Callum! Callum, stay with me." His pulse was thready, his breathing shallow. Toxin rebound. The chelation had cleared his blood, but the deep tissue stores were dumping all at once, flooding his system. She dragged him inside. She started an emergency 4 with the last of her supplies. She calculated the dosage for activated charcoal and realized she didn't have enough, and improvised with a compound from her grandmother's old pharmacopoeia. Wood ash and bentonite clay and saline, a folk chelation that Granny Opal had used on fishermen who'd swallowed contaminated water. "This is going to taste terrible," she told his unconscious body. "And it's going to work because my grandmother knew what she was doing, and so do I." She administered the compound. She monitored. She waited, and while she waited, she made a decision. She went to the filing cabinet. She pulled out every document, the land trust papers, the forged signatures, Ida Harlan's letter. She laid them beside the matching patient files from Granny Opal's clinic. She photographed everything with her phone. She sent the files to Delphine with a single message: "Call the state attorney general, not local. State. The Vanes committed fraud, forgery, and murder. I have proof, and I'm the one who's been hiding it. Not because I knew I was hiding it, but because my grandmother built her clinic around it. The records everyone's been looking for are the proof that the original landowners were competent, that the trust was valid, that the Vane family stole this island. And I have them because my grandmother was a nurse and a guardian, and she trusted me to finish what she started." Then she went back to Callum and sat beside him, and put her hand on his chest, and waited for his heart to decide. At 4 a.m., his eyes opened. The copper smell was gone, his hands were still, his breathing was deep and even, and his skin was cool and dry, and his eyes focused on her face with perfect clarity. "Nessa, I'm here. I need to finish. What I was saying before. You don't have to. I love you, full, unbroken, no tremor. I love you, and I am going to spend a very long time proving it if you'll let me." She put her forehead against his chest and held him and said, "I love you too. And you're an idiot for trying to die on my porch." "Your porch? This island is mine, Callum. It always was. And so are you." At 9 a.m., Delphine arrived with the State Attorney General's investigator, a woman named Pratt who had a recorder and a warrant and no tolerance for small talk. At 10 a.m., Morris Shanley arrived at the Harlan house, summoned by Pratt under the pretense of estate business. He walked into the living room and saw the files spread across the table, and Nessa standing beside them, and Callum standing beside Nessa, and his face went the color of curdled milk. "Those documents are privileged. Those documents are evidence," Pratt said. "Sit down, Mr. Shanley." He sat. He sweated. And then, because men built on borrowed power always collapse from the foundation up, he talked. It was vain. All of it. Ellis's father started it in 79, the forged signatures, the competency assessments. Ellis continued it. He took over the family practice and the trust management, and he realized that Opal Crane's granddaughter was working in his hospital and had access to patient records that could expose the original fraud. So he manufactured the malpractice case. Patient 9, Arthur Gaines, Ellis prescribed the lethal compound deliberately, not to kill Gaines, to create a liability event he could pin on Nessa. But Gaines died, and that made it murder, and Ellis needed a scapegoat. And Callum Harlan? Pratt said. Ida Harlan was the last obstacle. She held the land trust documents. Ellis couldn't access them while she was alive. When she died, Callum inherited. Ellis arranged the VA referral, the poison medication. If Callum died, the estate went to conservatorship. I'd administer. The documents would be destroyed. You're admitting to conspiracy to commit murder. I'm admitting to following instructions. Ellis Vane gave the orders. I delivered the paperwork. Delphine, who had been standing by the door with her arms crossed, said, "So you're a coward and a co-conspirator." How refreshing. Pratt arrested Shanley on the porch. A second team arrested Ellis Vane at his Charleston office at noon. By evening, the story had moved from the island's gossip chain to the state wire service, and Nessa's phone was ringing with calls from attorneys, journalists, and the South Carolina Board of Nursing. She turned the phone off. She sat on the Harlan porch with Callum beside her, and the salt air moving between them, carrying nothing but brine and jasmine, and the faint, clean smell of healing skin. "Your license," he said. "They'll reinstate it." Pratt said the board is already reviewing. The island, the land trust, will be restored to the original family's descendants. Your grandmother made sure. And us? She looked at him. His hands were resting on the arms of the Adirondack chair. Steady. Still. The scar through his eyebrow caught the porch light. His eyes were green-gray and warm. Us, she said, is not something I'm worried about. He reached over and took her hand. No tremor, no copper, just his calloused fingers threaded through hers and the sound of the marsh at dusk, and the island holding them the way it had always held its people, stubbornly, imperfectly, and with a faithfulness that outlasted every attempt to break it. "I love you," he said, steady, full, sure. "I know," she said. "I diagnosed it days ago." He laughed. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh, and the sound traveled across the porch and into the live oaks and out over the water, and it didn't fade, because she wasn't listening for it to end. She was listening for what came next. What came next was everything. If this story broke you, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another one. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit hardest, and share this with someone who needs a love story that fights back.